All right, guys, welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, we Nick around 2024 preview and prediction for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Look at this coaching staff. Scott Satterfield back for his second year after a 3-9 debut season. Brad Glenn will be the OC in his second year. Nate Fuqua and Tyson Vidic first-year roles as defensive coordinator. Started 2-8, went 1-8 to close of the year, and I did have a bet on this team's under-hitting, which ended up cashing. Looking at the offensive side of the ball, Nick, we certainly expected this unit to be one that struggled, but we thought they would struggle more than they did on the ground, which was pretty much non-existent. 217 yards rushing, 6th nationally. Corey Kenner arrived from LSU, and he lit the world on fire. A guy who's a thick back with an effective one-cut, hard runner with good balance. Not all that shifty, but really impressed last year. Showed great ball security, missed a good amount of tackles. We forced a good miss. That is 1K yard rusher here. They also added him some help, though. Evan Pryor from Ohio State was the next top 100 recruit. Didn't get on the field much. Loose runner with nice change of direction abilities. Should have a well-defined role in this offense. They also got Chance Williams from Grambling, who's quite impressive for being, 5'8", 185. Did a good job improving the athleticism in this backfield, which was a concern for us last year, Nick, but it didn't lead to, them being bad one bit. This was a very impressive ground attack, and they should be just as good, if not better, this year.
Very strong ground attack last year. Ground attack that was very surprising. 217 yards per game, top 10 in the nation. It's a really impressive number, and it really, goes through Corey Kenner, who was really solid for this team. Over 1,000 yards rushing, 1,047 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, and 5 scores for him. So really dominant back, really solid footwork, nice speed. I like what he can do a lot. A really solid leading back for this team. Evan Pryor from Ohio State, I think it's an underrated ad. Didn't play a whole lot for the Buckeyes, but I do think he has a lot of nice potential. And Chance Williams from Grambling State, he could be a guy to keep an eye on that could have some nice potential as a smaller, bit of a speedy, more shiftier back. I do think this three-headed group here is really solid. I do like this unit a lot.
And now you look at the quarterback position. They had Emory Jones last year. Obviously, it was a pretty good fit for this offense, but in terms of a passer, certainly had limited upside. They bring in Brendan Sorsby from Indiana. I didn't think he was all that bad last year. Showcased great competitiveness, like his mobility and ability to make plays with his legs. Would often throw lots of lofting balls downfield. Only had 5 interceptions, was a good player. Brady Lichtenberg saw some time in sporadic appearances. 6'1", 208 pounds, was a 3-star out of high school. The battle appears to be between these two. Sorsby, again, Nick, I thought he was pretty solid last year playing in the Big Ten. Goes to a bit of a lesser conference here where it's not going to be as physical, not as, competitive. And I think he could really thrive this year. But this is a guy, the jury still remains out for him. Again, I was impressed with him last year. I watched a lot of Hoosier football. And I think this is a guy who could really uplift this offense with some nice balance from him.
This is a guy they add in from Indiana that could be a really solid player for this team. I do think it's a decent add. You drop down on a level a little bit, in my opinion. I think that will help him out. He was solid at Big Ten play last year, though. I think the stats are okay. 1,500 yards passing, 15 touchdowns to 5 interception ratio. A solid number overall, 57% comp rate, a little bit low. But this is a guy, I think it's 6'3", 235. The frame is not too bad. I think he plugs into this system and is going to be just fine. I do think he's a solid quarterback to lead the way for the Bearcats here.
Now you look at the receivers they'll be thrown to. They lose a lot of production, but they do return top pass catcher Xavier Henderson, a possession wideout that showed reliable hands. Brought in Tyron Smith from UTEP, who has shown dangerous speed and high-level playmaking downfield in the past. Added a versatile pass catcher from FAU and Tony Johnson. Limited production, but only had 1 drop and 81 career targets. Behind the starters, though, the units a tad concerning. Starting Burkhalter didn't play at all after transferring from North Carolina A&T at 6'4", 200. Evan Prater also has nice size at 6'4", 208, but the converted quarterback only saw a dozen receptions. Aaron Turner had a few targets. Freshman Cale Woodburn did make some nice plays in the spring, and Barry Jackson noted a 65-yard touchdown in the season opener. Kept his red shirt intact and should see a big workload this fall at 5'11", 195. Not a horrid room here, but the depth will need to prove itself. Nick, I thought last year they did a pretty good job in the portal of bringing in pass catchers, especially late. But they do lose a lot of those guys like D. Wiggins, Braden Smith, Shimon Mateer. Are you worried about this receiving group any?
I am a little bit worried about it. I do think there is a little bit of lack of depth here. They don't really return a lot of production for further down the depth chart. That does certainly concern me when you look at that there's just not a whole lot of guys making production. They did add some solid players out of the portal, and obviously they returned Xavier Henderson, who is your top returning receiver, who is a really solid player for this team. He had a really good year last year, 782 yards receiving, 13.5 yards per grab, and 3 touchdowns for him. Aaron Turner is your next top returning receiver with only 89 yards of production off of a few grabs last year. They bring in Tony Johnson, who I really like, Tyron Smith, I think is a solid add as well. Two guys that you can kind of play where you want to move them around a little bit. You probably put Smith at the slot, Johnson at the X. Two players that they add who I think can be impressive. Smith from UTEP is a really speedy player. I do like him. And then Johnson from FAU could be really solid for them. Hasn't really worked out for him at previous stops, but he's hoping to step up and be involved. It's going to go a lot through Henderson this year. They're going to target him a lot. He's going to be the main player for this team in terms of wide receivers. He's going to get a ton of targets, probably get over 1,000 yards receiving this year. But he's a really solid player, and I think he can carry that extra weight workload that is.
Looking at the offensive line, a big reason why I'm so excited about this offense is because of what they return up front. They were a middle of the pack unit last year. They get all 5 starters back. Left tackle John Williams was pretty impressive in his first year starting. Does enter his 5th year in the program, 6'5", 320. We'll need to keep improving on the ground game, though, since he got great play out of the guard spots. Dartarian Tinsley at left guard was great in pass pro. Luke Condor, he did allow 4 sacks at right guard, but he was tremendous all around. He should contend for all conference honors with his run blocking prowess of 6'4", 323. Center is going to be occupied by Gavin Gerhard, who's been the starter for the past 2 seasons now, showcasing improvements and was a good run blocker. And a right tackle, Deontay Buford. On the other hand, he was quite poor. Really struggled in the back half of the season. Even started rotating at that position to close out the season. Ethan Green, a redshirt sophomore, will push him. This offensive line will contend as one of the best in the conference, maybe even one of the top 15 nationally, Nick. Good size. The experience is massive. This O-line has me incredibly excited for a team, again, that was top 10 nationally last year running the football. They add some guys to the backfield, so they're going to be more fresh. The experience here can really lead to some massive upside.
Returning all 5 starters is a massive return for your team. That's a huge thing that this team has going for it. These guys are all experienced. The youngest player on this offensive line is a redshirt junior, and that's DeAndre Buford at right tackle, who is a really solid player. The rest of these guys are redshirt seniors that have played at other programs as well. John Williams at left tackle, very sturdy, strong left tackle. Gavin Gerhard at center is a really good physical leader for this offensive line, a guy that's a veteran that has been playing there for a significant amount of time, a really good player. Started parts of the past 2 seasons, a really solid player in my opinion that I'm expecting a big season out of. The depth is a little weak, but I don't worry too much about that because they do have such great starters who are going to be able to eat up minutes and be solid for this offensive line.
I watched a lot of Bearcat football last year, and, they did a good job, moving the ball. They just couldn't finish. 113th in red zone touchdown percentage. That's just awful, and that's why they ended up winning only 3 games. And, the verdict here is this offense fell victim to that poor red zone execution and silly mistakes by the quarterback. And while Emory Jones's legs will be missed, Sorsby as a gamer should be able to provide some nice playmaking. He was quite fair versus some tougher competition last year. His run game was phenomenal, should be even better with this O-line and some new faces in the backfield. This offense is exciting upside, Nick. I certainly, we look at what they have on paper, look at some of the tape, and come to a conclusion. The conclusion here for me is this offense is going to showcase some drastic improvements, especially in the Big 12.
I like this offense a lot. I think this is an offense that has some really solid players. I think the wide receiver there, Henderson, is a really strong, great player for this offense. I think the quarterback play will be pretty good this year as well. I do like what this offense has because the running back room is phenomenal. They're going to lead the way on the ground. So nice quarterback play, really good running back play, and a star wide receiver. That's a good combo for me.
Look at the defensive side of the ball. And again, even though we were pretty on mark with this team's record, we kind of missed the beat on where they would be good and where they'd be weak, because this defense was a lot worse than expected, giving up 30 points per game. Added 12 guys in the portal, lost 17. So you see a good bit of turnover, returning 5 starters. You're looking at the defensive line, Dante Corleone. He's been one of the nation's best run stoppers, has emerged as a leader with good football IQ, has an impressive combo of explosiveness, power, and tenacity. Very good at defending outside zone. At 6'2", 320, though, his stamina is not all that great, so the snap count, certainly could lead to improvement. Alongside him, Jalen Hunt had no production, but at 6'4", 315, did play 200-plus snaps, does a good job as a gap controller. Micah Coleman arrives from Eastern Michigan. He was solid in his extensive snaps. Darian Varner didn't have the expected impact last year for Wisconsin, but he was a productive edge when he was at Temple. Cameron Wilson from Louisville was just a small rotational piece over 4 years. With Eric Phillips being a quality defensive end and run defender over the past 2 years at 260 pounds. This is a more than capable D-line. Struggled to stop the run. Now lose some key components in the front 6. This is a 3-3-5 they run, Nick. Again, 111th nationally against the run. That was not expected one big, because I thought they had the pieces to be able to be better in that regard, and they weren't.
They struggled against the run, which is really a big problem for this defense. They returned some solid pieces, and they went to the portal to kind of fill up this defensive line that is a new look. Dante Carlilone is a really solid player. They returned 39 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, and a pass breaker for him. He's a big physical guy on that defensive line at nose tackle. Really solid. You plug him in the middle there. He's really good. Jalen Hurt, not a whole lot of production, but I like the size of him. I think he's a really good player in the gap. They added some other players. Micah Coleman is a really solid player. Looked good in a lot of snaps at Eastern Michigan. I like what he can do. De'Aaron Varner as well as a guy that could potentially be involved after having some struggles at some previous programs. He moves around a little bit. And Cameron Wilson, I think that's a nice rotational piece that could step up and be a little bit stronger this year. A lot of new faces on this front part of this defense. Are they going to be able to play together and play strong? That's certainly a key question.
Look at the middle of this defense, Jared Bartlett, a nice ad from West Virginia, played a lot of football. Not much of a run defender, has been a really good pass rusher, really fires into the pocket. Jonathan Thompson was a sound tackler. He's not going to step into a full middle linebacker role. Jack Dingle was a starter last year. Wasn't all that great, but should improve a good bit this year. Added Connor Keys from Minnesota. Trevor Adams returns, neither of which had snaps last year. Relatively thin middle of this defense, Nick, that at one point under Luke Fickell was incredibly stout, but they do lose some key components in the Pace brothers. And that certainly leads to me for having worry of concern, especially if this D-line can't really bring the tenacity that we expected last year. With the guys they lose here in the middle, there could be some big reasons for concern.
Dingle and Thompson are two nice returning pieces. Dingle, 53 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, plus a sack for him. Thompson, 31 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss for him. Decent production there. I think they added some nice pieces as well. I think the Bartlett ad from West Virginia is a really solid ad, a really good player, nice pass rusher, really good at getting it after the quarterback. I think he needs to polish out his run defense like you alluded to there, but I think he's a guy that's got good high football IQ, really solid getting after the quarterback, a really good ad. Trevor Adams could be okay as well as a guy that didn't play a whole lot. I think this is a unit that's not incredible, but I do think they have a nice DNA here. Some players that have good experience in this program that could develop and turn to stars.
In this run defense, they were awful at the end of the year. They gave up 284 yards per game over the last 5 contests. They went 1-4 in those games, and the one outlier where they played pretty well is the game they ended up winning. So they can certainly accomplish big things when they can slow down the run. But man, they're just getting brutalized there at the end of the year. You look at the secondary, they allowed the 87th most pass plays at 30-plus yards, but they were 21st in opponent completion rating allowed. So they also had some good and bad. Quite good unit under Fickell, really elite. I'd say borderline with what they were able to accomplish, but for many years, but not much really remains from his era. It's a complete makeover. Mekhi Miller comes over from New Mexico State. He was an elite tackler, good coverage asset from the slot. Derek Canteen will come over to occupy a starting CB role. Was a high-level player at Georgia Southern. Elevated his game against the run this past year for Virginia Tech. Jordan Young, he was about average last year after transferring in and should provide a solid impact as well. Probably at slot. They bring in Armandi Arnold, who was a stout outside corner for Idaho last year. Kalen Carroll played a good bit, but wasn't any good. Lots of experience here at corner, though, is what I'm reading. The safety group is a bit of a mystery. DJ Taylor struggled against the run, and as a tackler, missed 7 tackles and 200 snaps. Josh Minkins transfers in, playing lots of snaps at Louisville, but was always just an average performer for them. Antoine Peak only saw a few snaps, and added a reserve from Ohio State and Kai Stokes. They do have a nice addition here in Logan Wilson from North Texas. He was great for the Mean Green over the last 2 years. Ken Willis was good at times. So they have a few different options here. New scheme should help, a nice cornerback room. Safety needs to figure it out a bit. But this is going to be a strength for this team, Nick. Probably not as elite as when they had Sauce Gardner, but this will be a good secondary.
I do like the secondary. The secondary has some solid pieces that can be involved. Jordan Young's a nice returning piece, 34 total tackles, 7 pass breakups, plus a pick. DJ Taylor was a phenomenal and covered 16 total tackles. Wasn't really incredible last year, but he's a younger guy that can be involved and sort of grow as things go on here. I think he's a guy you can look at. Mekhi Miller is a really solid ad from New Mexico State, a very elite tackler. I like him in the slot a lot. You can move him around. I think he's a really good ad for this team. Derek Canteen's a really strong cornerback who I think will be a very impact player out there, a high-level guy they added out of the portal. I like what I've seen out of him from the previous stops in the group. I think, like I said, DJ Taylor is a guy that could grow at safety. I want to see what he looks like this year. The secondary unit was not bad last year, right? 69th in the country is not really that bad at all. Top 70 unit. I think they can get to that level again this year. I do like the pieces they have.
The verdict for this defense, this unit was a far cry from what you saw under Fickell, as the run D was just flat out abused over the final month of the year. While the secondary would crack at times, despite being a good group, I think we see some modest improvements up front, but the linebacking group could greatly hold them back as they progress. But they will look good against the pass. Look at the prediction for the Bearcats. They lost a few games in silly fashion last year, but also got smoked in the others. But that was a building block year, as I really like what the offense has in store, and that includes less mistakes and more balance. That's only if Sorsby ends up playing at a good level. On the other hand, the defense is destined to improve, but it's greatly possible they continue to regress against the run. But enough transfers should really help alleviate future pain here. I'm going to go with a bold prediction on Cincinnati, Nick. This is a team, again, I bet on last year to hit the under. This year, I'm betting on the over. I just think the schedule, it kind of aligns for them to do well with a great offensive line. I think Sorsby will greatly improve this offense. They'll be much better in the red zone, which could have led to, a multitude of different victories last season. I think Miami at Ohio, a game they lost last year at home, that's going to be a big trap game for them. I think they'll take care of business this season. I think this offensive line, though, does surge them to victories over teams like Colorado and TCU. They do lose to 4 tough opponents in conference. 8 wins, obviously that's pretty lofty here, Nick, and I'm only giving the offense a B, but I think at the end of the year, they'll be one of the better ones in this conference. 8 wins here, going bold on the Bearcats.
I'm copying you, and I think this is a team that I'm equally as high on. I think this is a team that has a lot of things going for it on the offensive side of the ball. I think the quarterback play will be just fine with Sorsby. I think he's a really good add from Indiana. The running back room is phenomenal, and they're a really strong unit. They'll be able to dart all over the ground. I think, they have a great returning top receiver that could be really solid for this team. You return a guy like him and Xavier Henderson, who is a really solid piece. The defense, yes, I have some questions, but I do think they've added some nice pieces out of the portal, and the schedule is pretty favorable. Look, I don't think Pitt will be a very good team this year. Houston, Texas Tech, these are teams that are not phenomenal. Towson, Miami, Ohio, and not incredible teams. And the non-conference Arizona State, not very good. Colorado, I don't think they're going to be very good this year, despite all the hype they continue to receive. And then TCU is, very iffy on them as well. The teams they lose to, they could potentially pick off West Virginia or UCF as well, 2 teams that I'm equally as high on as the Bearcats. I think a lot of the teams in this conference is very divided. You have a lot of teams at the top who are kind of going to be all in that same 8-4, 9-3 range. You're going to have a lot of teams at the bottom that are going to be in that 3-9, 4-8 range. It's kind of a weird split this year with this conference. I like this Bearcats team. I think they're a solid team. I think they've done a good job in the portal, good job building this roster.
I do think Miami of Ohio is a very good team. We both know that. The defense will be very stout, but they also lost plenty of pieces in their own right. Totals at 5.5. They should easily make a bowl game, I would say. They should be at 4 wins come the end of September, Nick, so this is very attainable here. Appreciate you joining me today, as always, Nick, breaking down the Bearcats.
Looking forward to watching this team. They're a very fun team in this conference.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.